Parshas Devarim. This week's Parsha, which begins the Sefer Devarim, the last of the 5 books of Moses, is a record of Moshe's parting words to the children of Israel before he passes away. He passed away at the very end of the Sefer, and these are divrei tochachos, these are reproofs that Moses is giving the children of Israel, and he waits, as Chazal observe, until just before his passing, so that his words are most likely to be accepted and to have the lasting effect that back and forth during his lifetime might not quite reach. So one of the things that Moshe Rabbeinu says is he describes the transition from a Chorev, which is the place, another name for Mount Sinai, and they turned, and after 40 years, unfortunately, because of the sin of the spies of the Meraglim, that the children of Israel were condemned to spend much more time than they would have needed to had they not sinned before they entered Israel, and the people who had been part of that generation had to die off before they entered the land. And now they're about to enter the land. So Moshe Rabbeinu says, it's now time to go. He says, Penu Usa'u, this is Perek Aleph, Pasuk Zayin, that's 1:7. He says, okay, turn. You're leaving the receiving of the law, and Bo'u Har Ha'emori, Vel Kol Shechino, Barava, Bahar, Basrila, Benegav, Uvachaviyam. Turn, go towards basically the land of Israel. Eretz HaKnani, Balvanon, Ad HaNahar, Hagadol, Nahar Paras, and giving some brief allusion to the boundaries of Israel. And he says, I've given it to you. Bo'u Shuas Haaretz, come, inherit the land, possess it, that I promised to your forefathers. And now he shifts, and he says, I can't handle this by myself. And I said, Va'omar alechem, and I said to you, Lo Esahi at that time, Lemor, the following, Lo uchal levadi se'es eschem, I can't carry you by myself. Hashem Elokechem, hirba eschem, v'imchem hayom k'cholei hashemaim l'orod. God has made you plentiful, has multiplied you. You are like the stars of the heaven. There's just too many of you. And God is going to increase your numbers as well. Hashem Elokechem, God, the God of your fathers. Yosef Alechem Kochem Elpam, he's going to multiply you by 1,000 times, and he's going to bless you. What does that lead to? Echa esolevadi torchachem masachem vrivchem. How? And this word alludes to the reading of the book of Tanakh by the same name, Echa, which is Lamentations. And this is a lament of Moshe, and there's an allusion to the underlying problem that's the consequence of which is recorded in Echa, which is the character of the children of Israel can lend itself to a significant amount of conflict, unnecessary conflict, which eventually gets distilled, especially during the time of the second Beis HaMikdash, the second temple, into sinas chinam, into baseless, unwarranted hatred one of the other. And what Moshe Rabbeinu says here is, how can I carry torchachem, masachem, vrivchem? Rashi says torchachem is that they were just troublesome. They just never ended. If there was a dispute, they never ended. If they saw that the other side was winning, they jumped to come up with new proofs and new witnesses and try to win as opposed to try to find the right result. And masachem, vrivchem. According to Rashi, the implication of masachem is that they were skeptics and they were always conjuring up bad motivations to Moshe Rabbeinu. And Rivchem is that they were just generally, they were critics. They were open, they were unsatisfied and always complaining. So Moshe says, I can't handle this by myself, which is a curious thing that he says, because as the commentaries say, it comes down to the Medrash. Is it possible that Moshe Rabbeinu, who could speak to Parero, and he could be the facilitator of all the miracles in Egypt and cross the sea and bring the people out, etc., and he can't handle the pressure? So he says, Havulachem anashim chachamim unvonim viduim l'shivtechem v'asimem roshechem. Bring me, you should have for yourselves wise and knowing or known heads, people who could, important people of your tribes, and I'll place them on top of you. In other words, there's an administrative shakeup taking place. Now this harks back to Yisro and his advice, which the Almighty endorsed. And that is why the Meforshim say that there is an apparent redundancy in the verse, the previous verse, which is Tes, in Pasuk Tes, which is verse 9. It says, Va'omar alechem ba'isahi lemor. And I said, saying. So what is this I said saying? You could just say, V'omar lechem v'esahi lo chal v'adi, and I said to you at that time, I can't do it. But it says, V'omar, and I said, lemor, saying. And the implication, according to some commentaries, is that what he's saying is, I didn't come up with this. This is the words of God. God told me to do this. And we know that the initial suggestion is recorded in Sefer Shemos, Parshas Yisro, as having come from Yisro as advice to his son-in-law. Now, what happens, it's to appoint judges and to lighten the burden on Moshe. Now, we have the response of the people, Vata'anu osi, and you answered me, says Moshe Rabbeinu, Vatamru, Tov hadavar asher dibarta lasos. That which you have said to do is good. It's a good thing. Why is it a good thing? So there are actually chilukei deos, there are different approaches towards this. Some attribute a bad motive to the children of Israel. And they said, we know we can't corrupt Moshe. But if he appoints our peers, people who we know, we might be able to buy them off. And so that's a good thing. We finally have a way to beat the system. The Netziv cites this, and he also says that there's a positive reading of this also, which is that, yes, it will lighten the burden on Moshe, who the children of Israel had a good relationship with, by and large, despite all of the mishigas and their criticisms, etc. And they said it's a good thing to lighten the burden. Now, what they should have said, according to the first explanation, is they should have said, no, we don't want to hear from anybody but you because you're the best. You're the best, you're world class. There's nobody better than you. Why would we want anybody else to do it? But they took advantage of the situation, or at least they intended to take advantage of the situation. There's another thing that's going on here, which is, where do they come off saying, Tov hadavar asher dibarta lasos, what you said is good? Who asked them? Who said that Moshe Rabbeinu was waiting for them to reply? But evidently, this is a conversation. It's a conversation between the leader of the children of Israel who took them out, and who, at the behest of the Almighty, is proposing, not imposing, a new structure of leadership. This sounds familiar to us. In other words, Moshe Rabbeinu could have simply imposed his will, and it's not his will, it's God's will. But instead, he puts it out there. Havu lochem anoshim. Havu is come on, let's do this. It sounds like he's working, if not consulting, he's certainly in a cooperative manner. And what would have happened had the children of Israel said, no, it's not good? Well, we don't know because that didn't happen. But we have a key to what Moshe is doing because we have seen this in the Torah, in the very first parsha of the Torah, in Bereshis, where the Almighty says something that Chazal read as being very similar, which is, this is in Bereshis, Perek Aleph, Pasuk Chavav, that's 1:26, Vayomer Elokim, this is in an account of the creation. And God said, Na'aseh Adam b'tzalmenu kidmusenu. Let us make man in our form and image, or in our image and form. Discussion about image and form is a separate issue, but he says, Na'aseh, let us make. Who's us? There's God, there's Yachid Bolamo. He's the only one around. And Eina Od Milvado, there is no power other than the Almighty. What's he saying? Let us make. And Rashi says here, quoting Chazal, of course, he says, Nasa Adam, he says, An v'tanuso shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, lomadnu mikan. We learned the humility of the Almighty, Lefisha Adam hu b'dmus hamal achim v'yiskanu bo, because man shares some features with the angels, and the angels would be envious of man. Lefikach nimlach bahen, and therefore he consulted them. Again, God can do anything he wants. He can say, there's going to be man, and poof, there's man. So why is he consulting with the angels? And it comes at a risk. What's the risk? The risk is that there will be, there are different texts, but Tano saying, saying you're giving an opportunity for the heretics to say that there are multiple deities. Or in Rashi's words over here, it says, Yesh makom la'apikorsim lirdos. You're giving space for heretics to be critical. Nevertheless, lo nimna hakosov milamed derech eretz umidos anova shehagodol nimlach v'noto rishus min hakotin. And nevertheless, the Torah uses these words, the Torah being written by God, to tell you that a leader should always consult those who are going to be affected by his decision. He ought not simply impose his will, but rather should be collaborative with those who are subordinate to him. Now, doesn't mean he has to follow their advice, but he should consult with them and he should hear their opinion. In many situations, a leader has to impose rules, structures that are new and that will affect, in some cases negatively, others around. And it says here, there should be communication. And it shouldn't just be a memo from now on, this is what we're doing, but rather let's get people together and let's talk about it. And that is the lesson the Torah teaches, and that appears to be the lesson that Moshe picks up and is teaching again by saying, you should have these leaders. And then we see that he's persuasive. And the Bnei Israel say, Tov hadavar asher dibarta lasos. This is a good thing. Leadership is not imposing your will. Leadership is bringing people along to do the right thing. Have a good Shabbos.